Catriona is an adult on the autism spectrum. As a child, she suffered as a result of undiagnosis and was bullied and isolated during her childhood. Because of this, and in addition to her dedication to Scouts, she is a great ambassador here. Oh, big round of applause to GC 2018 Queen's Torch Relay.
Hi everyone, my name's Catriona. I'm an adult on the autism spectrum. What did I like about school? Well, probably my favourite subject was in the VCE subject, which is for year 11 and 12, was for legal studies. I really enjoyed legal studies because it's very sort of factual and very kind of all about facts, and there's sort of no right or wrong. Although there kind of is a right or wrong in some ways, but there's also grey areas as well. And it's actually still a passion of mine, and I'd really like to help people who end up in the criminal justice system as a result of being on the autism spectrum and the issues that can go with that. So it's all sort of linked in really well in that sense. After high school, I went on to study a Bachelor of Social Science, majoring in Human Services and Recreation. That means that you can work in programming type areas. I actually use a lot of that programming skills in my scouting voluntary work at the moment, and also you can work with kids in the youth justice system or in the criminal justice system, which is an area that I would like to work with either directly or indirectly, probably in a more indirect role. What were the social issues and how did they play out? It was basically in both primary and secondary school. Probably in primary school it was more like the kind of fitting in thing, but to a lesser extent because at that age they're not as into needing to fit in and needing to be cool and needing to be accepted, although that did play into it a bit. It was the isolation, the exclusion, a lot of bullying, and pretty much the same all through school. But as I got to be older, it was probably a lot more bitchy, kind of a lot more nasty. Obviously, as they get older, the bullying becomes much more nasty and much more personal. So it was perhaps a bit more severe in secondary school, but it definitely was right the way through school at both levels, and quite severe on both counts, both primary and secondary school. The isolation was perhaps the hardest, and even as an adult, I still, to some extent, although a lesser extent, suffer from that isolation. It's important to note that I actually wasn't diagnosed until I was an adult. I was nearly 23 years old. Would it have helped? I think it would have, because if your parents and if the school understands, then they can educate children to be nice to kids who are different. They can educate why kids are different, why they are how they are. You can give them help, you can give them support. So yes, I think it would have made a huge difference. The bullying was kind of a mixture. It was a lot of name calling, a lot of exclusion, a lot of a bit of physical stuff, particularly when I was younger. Pulling the chair out from behind you, throwing hot soup on you, that sort of stuff. Also hitting you, that kind of thing. A lot of exclusion, that sort of stuff. In those days, I think it was a bit like any kind of abuse or bullying. It was really sort of, my parents, particularly my mum, really tried to help and try and get me help and try and get the school to do something, but in those days they tended to just sweep it under the carpet, pretend it didn't happen, or tell you to ignore it. Not that that actually did any good, because they still kept going it, because if you're different, it doesn't matter if you ignore it or not, they're still going to pick on you. Tertiary, I didn't really get bullied as such, although I was kind of isolated and I found it hard to mix with people. But there wasn't so much actual like bullying, and there wasn't name calling or hitting me or any of that sort of severe, or throwing soup or any of that sort of stuff that happened in primary and secondary school. You need to understand that every child, every person is different, and just because they're different doesn't mean that they're not a nice person, doesn't mean that they can't be a good friend. You just need to understand that they think differently and that there's different ways of viewing the world.